Item 3B, proposed ordinance prohibiting the rental of apartments as vacation rentals and amending the Palm Springs Municipal Code. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. On April 20th of this year, the City Council adopted an interim urgency ordinance that prohibited the rental of apartments as vacation rentals. That ordinance expires November 30th, 2016. This proposed ordinance is recommended by the Vacation Rental Subcommittee, and I'm going to be brief and then open it up to the subcommittee to discuss their policies, goals, and objectives. Would prohibit apartments, and an apartment under this ordinance is defined as 2 or more dwelling units, and it would prohibit those as vacation rentals. Any existing apartment or apartment unit that has a current valid vacation rental certificate may continue to operate as a short-term rental until January 1st, 2018, after which then the short-term vacation rentals must cease. It is not the intent of this ordinance to prohibit property such as an estate property or a main house that has a casita, or even some of our very large estate properties have 2 casitas on them. It's not the intent of this to prohibit that type of property as a vacation rental, and there's actually zoning code restrictions on how those types of properties can be rented out. So if adopted, staff will not issue any new vacation rental certificates to apartments, and the current apartments would be able to continue as long as to operate with a valid certificate until January 1st, 2018. And there are several alternatives for these operators. I do want to correct one public speaker today who indicated that in order to convert to a hotel, they would have to remove their kitchens, and that is not correct. The zoning code does provide for a hotel in an R2 zone with kitchens. It just depends on the final process that you have to go through to get it approved, but they do not have to rip out kitchens if that is one of the alternatives they want to use. And then finally, before I turn it over to the subcommittee, several places in the ordinance it talks about affordable housing, and I wanted to distinguish that. Affordable housing people think of as a legally defined term in state law regarding low or moderate income housing, and that wasn't the intent of this ordinance, and would recommend the City Council, if so introduced today, would change the words in the ordinance from affordable housing to housing that is affordable.
Can I also point out that on the top of page 02, that you have this, in your staff report, has a typo, and it says January 1, 2108, and I thought this is going to outlive all of us.
Yeah.
So I was sure that's a typo.
It is, and you'll see on page 2 of the ordinance it correctly states 2018, and that's a problem when you've got city clerks that have very short time spans.
Yeah.
Short timer. Okay, Councilmember Coors.
Sure. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to our city clerk. And I appreciate you clarifying that houses with casitas, guest houses, can operate after this if it passes the same way as they could operate before. I do have one question, though, and it's not anything I think we'll fix tonight, but I do while it's up here. What is the reason that if someone has a house with a casita and they want to rent out their casita as a vacation rental short-term, that they can't? They can rent out both together short-term, but if they're living there, they can't. Do you know the rationale why that was passed? I think it was last year, so. When?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
No.
I think so, when state law changed to say that the city had to provide casitas, granny flats, affordable housing for family members, we were concerned at that time that these casitas and granny flats were not going to be used for their intended purpose, and that was for affordable housing for family members. And that's why we came up with these zoning restrictions, because we were concerned at that time these would all turn into vacation rentals.
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you. I was just curious about that. Well, I wasn't here then. And I appreciate you answering the question on kitchens, because I think at least I've heard that from several folks who presently have buildings that are entirely or partially vacation rental apartments, including that they heard that from planning. So there is no prohibition there for them. I just want to clarify that again.
Correct.
Okay. Do you want to ask something? Because I think, and Jarek, jump in if I don't say this right. I think our goal here for the existing ones, and we can talk about moving forward, but for the handful of folks who currently have apartments with valid permits, that we want to make it as easy as for them to continue operating, given they did it when it was allowed, and their permits granted expire in a year, and they can then have to get another year. But we want to make sure they were in compliance with the building and health and safety requirements as a small hotel, because many of them are operating as a small hotel. They advertise, some of them, with hotel in their name, or they have in the past. And so consumers assume there are going to be the same health and safety requirements and be on the level playing field with hotels as far as those, but not necessarily make them go through the whole CUP process and all the cost and change title of their building, which means refinancing and all that goes with it. So I guess what the question is there a way we can do that? Is there a way we could have the same health and safety building inspections for the same rules as a small hotel, but not make them go through the entire CUP process and actually convert their building? And I'm just talking about the ones that exist with legal permits now. So, Flynn, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'll jump in on that,
Yeah,
and
please.
Mr. Thompson can chime in if he feels like it. I think what we could do is have specific standards for vacation rentals, and as part of those standards, that might include going through some type of a process to verify that they meet life safety and building code requirements. So separate and apart from a hotel, you can adopt additional standards for vacation rentals that they would have to meet life safety requirements. And Jay, if that sounds in line with our discussion earlier today.
Yes, I believe that is the fact. We would definitely, if the council wanted to proceed through that, we would include in another ordinance local restrictions and the authority for the building or fire marshal to inspect these types of properties.
Right. And holding them to the same standards as a small hotel.
Correct.
For that purpose. Okay. Is that something we can, Doug, is that something we can change tonight? Or we can come back and fix later? What's the best way to do that if everyone's in agreement on that piece?
Yeah, let's see what we can come up with as I'm sitting here.
Okay. So that's sort of, if you're in agreement with that, do you have any thought, just on the grandfather, the ones that exist now? And then I have some comments on moving forward.
Clarify what you just said, because
Sure.
I've just gotten a little confused.
Okay, so
As,
the way the ordinance is written is that the existing apartments would have to either become a condo, convert to a hotel, and follow the hotel standards and go through the CUP process and actually change their title, or change title to a condo, or rent for 28 days or more. I think our goal was that they just follow the same health and safety rules as a hotel for short-term renters that a hotel has to. So if there's another way we can do that, that won't cost them the same amount of money, but achieve the goal, we'd like to do that.
okay,
Is that,
all right, I understand what
I
you
think
said.
as you heard some testimony tonight, some of these, the owners have indicated that it would be too expensive to do that, and that would put them out of business. So the only thing you're achieving by that, I believe, is just the requirement for a CUP. Only certain types of hotels in an R2 need a CUP, and it's basically on the kitchens. So by trying to put these health and safety restrictions in there, you're in essence already making it prohibitive for them to operate.
we don't know.
As some of them has testified.
Yes, we haven't seen any data on that. But there is a concern that small hotels, often 5-6 units, have to do all these things, and that these should be on the same level playing field moving forward. And when people come to our city, and we want to make sure the health and safety is taken care of, I think that's our responsibility. So if there's a way we can do it and make it less onerous, I think we'd like to do that. So sort of move on to the rest of it, and the reason the subcommittee is recommending prohibiting future permits for apartments, multifamily, vacation rentals. And there are a whole number of reasons we discussed. I think this staff report does a great job in focusing on housing that's affordable, and we talked about housing that's affordable for families. You know, if COD West Campus comes here, having affordable housing that's affordable for students is going to be important as well. But it's to maintain our housing stock, and I think it's being proactive. Right now we have 54 units, but we want to not see that continue. It's to help maintain what affordable housing we have, which the council recently identified as one of our top 5 priorities. As far as, you know, the difference between an apartment and single-family residence, and we're working on single-family residences, but people do share a wall. So you could have a mother with a kid in school sharing a wall with different people every weekend, and sharing a pool and sharing a laundry, which is different than having a neighbor where there's a backyard that's next to each other and the view of the committee. We want to make sure, of course, the health and safety issues, and we want to level the playing field with small hotels, because essentially these are small hotels, and a lot of them advertise that way. So that was just a lot of our thinking going into it. I don't think I have much more at this point to add, so if you want to go ahead, JR, with sort of, at least from the subcommittees.
Well,
point.
what I would
Councilman
add
Roberts?
for the benefit of the council is that, you know, obviously we're bringing you a list of recommendations. This was very, very difficult to start. We knew that going in. I don't know that there's a perfect solution. You know, one of the things that Jeff and I found as we moved into this was that most other California resort cities that are similar to Palm Springs in terms of the volume of tourism are just doing flat out bans. And that's kind of what we were hit with initially as a tidal wave. And we were looking to see if there were ways to allow some level of short-term rentals as an alternative form of lodging. We created a list of very specific objectives to try to weigh all of our actions or recommendations against. It really relates more to the single-family houses, but the reason we took on the apartments right away was for the reasons that Jeff already recommended. We saw, or suggested, we saw this as an urgency because apartments really are our last hold on what might be housing that's affordable. Secondly, nobody saw this coming. You know, we got email today questioning how we could allow permits and then how could we take them away once people made investments. And, you know, having sat on planning commissions for way too many years, I can say that it's not uncommon that we have zoning, that we have ordinances. They do adjust when the new impacts occur or negative impacts occur. It's not uncommon for cities, and particularly us, to adjust our ordinances or to adjust our code in certain ways. That's what happened. We see real impacts on affordability, and we think that that is a big negative for Palm Springs. When young people or people starting out or people who want to come here without a lot of money can't afford to live here, or to me, more importantly than any of that, our own staff can't afford to live here, the people who work here, that's a problem. And that was sort of the driving force for me in this. One PS came to us originally with this recommendation, and when it first came to us, I thought it was far-reaching. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. When I looked at the criteria that they brought, it made more sense to me. We're getting arguments from building owners or apartment owners who are clearly upset about this, and for good reason, that there's no economic viability in their buildings without short-term rentals. Well, I've thought about that a lot, and my argument to that in our recommendations to you is they were once viable as apartment buildings because they were built as apartment buildings and they were maintained as apartment buildings. They may not make the kind of money as long-term apartment buildings or 30-day rentals that they do as short terms, but I don't see that there's no longer any economic viability in long-term rentals. It just doesn't make sense to me. It has been a model in this city for as long as the city has existed. Things Jeff and I are not sure of. We come to you with recommendations, but we really struggled with the sunset period. Was a year enough? Was a year and a half enough? Maybe we should give longer for people to either go back to long-term rentals or if they do want to convert to hotels. We're very open to looking at the costs and requirements of the city for hotel conversion. But one thing we were not willing to bend on whatsoever was the safety aspects of converting to hotels. There's a very specific and clear reason that hotel rooms are held to a higher level of safety in terms of standards. Our fire chief could stand here and give us a list of them, but the short version is that people are not familiar with short-term rentals or hotel rooms. So with respect to exiting and saving themselves, they don't know necessarily where all the exits are. They don't know how to get out of buildings. And that is what many of the standard safety requirements are in hotels, is teaching, showing you, making it very easy to exit a building very quickly and making exits possible for quick exit. And that's not necessarily available in apartments. So the safety requirements isn't something that we were really willing to bend on. We were willing to look at sunsetting. We were willing to look at zoning. If you are allowed to have kitchens in a hotel in R2, maybe we can look at the possibility of having kitchens in hotels in R1. Obviously, if hotels are in R1, I guess that's a whole conditional use change to begin with, right? There are none. Well, maybe if we're looking at apartments being converted, that's something we can consider. We're willing to look at any way to make the people that have purchased buildings to convert them into short-term rentals, make it easier or financially viable to convert them back. But we really thought it was vital that we get our apartment stock back and turn that tide. And the reason we did the moratorium is we wanted to catch it in time. Again, nobody saw this coming. In the beginning, a handful of them was not a problem. Same is true of the houses. It wasn't a problem in the beginning. It's now turning. It's having an enormous effect on who can buy here, who can rent here, or more importantly, who can't buy here and who can't rent here anymore, because all of that stock is getting sucked up in a way. So the reason I'm telling you all of this was to give you sort of a fuller picture of the criteria we used and the places that were flexible. And we, as any subcommittee does, bring back a basket of recommendations for us to all consider together. And hopefully they're not all deplorable. Oh, God, more presidential references. I guess that's never going to end. Okay.
Well, I really appreciate all the detail from Councilmember Roberts and Councilmember Coors, because a lot of people might not realize, but because of the Brown Act, the rest of us can't even go to your public subcommittee meetings and sit in the back of the room and listen. It's against the law. So we have to wait until these meetings to hear your input to us. So I've been really open-minded on this until tonight, because I wanted to hear what you had to say. So I appreciate the details. But I've been concerned all along about our small hotels are a part of the culture and infrastructure of our city that goes back 50, 60 years or more. I mean, they're an important part of our infrastructure. And even tonight we were talking about the Small Hotel Tourism Business Improvement District. And why are they requesting that? It was because they're under a lot of stress because of a lot of the new hotels that are going in Palm Springs, and the single-family vacation rentals. So they need the help of the additional advertising. So that's why they want to have this additional money come from their pockets to help advertise the small hotels. And it's not. It just doesn't seem fair to me. If somebody has a small hotel, that they have to worry about ADA, handicap parking, they have to worry about lifts out of the swimming pool, they have to worry about fire and safety regulations, and someone who has an apartment building doesn't have to do that. It just doesn't seem fair. However, I was glad to hear about the kitchens thing, because that was something I was really concerned about, people having to rip the kitchens out. If they don't have to, that's good. The 2018, I think, is too soon, because if people have to work through the labyrinth of City Hall, no offense, to change these things, it's going to take a while. So I think, just having 1 year, a little over a year is not enough. We need to really seriously look at making that 2 or 3 years. But what's my last note? And also, another thing we kept hearing about, there's so few of these, But we've all lived here long enough to remember when there was very few vacation rentals of single-family homes, and now we have over 2,000. So, people talked about how much more profitable it is to turn their apartment buildings into vacation rentals. And if there's that much profit, you know what's going to happen. Before long, the number of apartment buildings being turned into short-term vacation rentals is going to skyrocket. So any number that there are today, I don't think is particularly that relevant. So listening to you so far, and I know you're going to speak some more, so I want to hear what you have to say. But right now, I'm leaning toward. I really think we should be supporting this permanent ban. Councilmember Coors.
Councilmember Foat hasn't spoken yet.
Okay, Councilmember Foat.
Yeah.
Questions. Because I started talking about this a long time ago, before your time, because what alarmed me was the apartment buildings converting to condos. And that started, to be even more. We have a huge apartment complex on South Palm Canyon, or is that East Palm Canyon? I can't remember if it's east. I never remember if it's south or east. But anyway, and then there was the other apartment unit that was on Sunrise and Amato that converted from apartments to condos at the corner there, and I don't remember the name of those. And so that started to alarm me, because that started to really take aim at our apartment availability. So, but I have a couple of questions on this, and one of the things that I commercial use of a building is, and Mr. Franklin was correct in pointing that out, was more than 4 units. And so I think we need to take a look at the number of units also. There's also someone who contacted me who owns a duplex, and he lives in one side of the duplex and he rents out the other side. So he's right on scene, and he rents out his other half of the duplex to short-term rental. And so I'd like to see that addressed in some sort of a, whether it's renting, if an owner occupies one unit, then the other unit could be, or if a relative of the owner, the other unit could be short-term rental. So if you can address that, that would, I think, would help also. The other thing is that in San Francisco, and you'd probably be more familiar with this than I am, people hold property as tenants in common, I think it is, or where it's almost a co-op, but it's not quite a co-op as I would know, like in New York, a co-op. And so, what's to stop this from happening at some of our smaller buildings in order to keep them as short-term vacation rentals if they co-op them that way? So,
Sure.
you
There are
don't need
questions.
to add me that.
No,
This is
I
a
can answer.
question that if you could address, and along with the duplex side, one side and the other. And then the standards for the small hotels, and I really do agree with that, because it's very difficult for our small hotel owners. We had to battle the health department. Probably about 5 years ago, I did battle with the health department, because they were not going to allow them to serve breakfast without having a full commercial kitchen. And most of these small inns don't have full commercial kitchens. And so we were successful in gaining a waiver, but they still had the standards that they had to, and they had to be ADA accessible and all of these things. And so I'm seeing the short-term rentals in apartments not having to live up to the same standards that across the street, that small hotel, which is also basically doing short-term rentals, has to do. So one has an advantage across the street and the other one doesn't. And then just for a staff thing, on page 13 you gave, there was a table. I had a hard time reading the table because I didn't know, if we put a table in, can we have a key so that we know what the abbreviations stand for? That has nothing to do with this, but it was, I didn't know what the abbreviation stood for. I knew what apartment stood for, but I didn't know what the other abbreviation stood for. And so I'm anxious, to see us deal with this, because we are on the verge of having some real serious issues in the city, and it's a shame, because I've been I know a friend of mine lives at the Twist, and it's a great complex, but it also has that feeling of transiency. And so I see both sides of it. The city red tagged that building and took everybody out of that building. It was a horrible, horrible cockroach-infested building. And we had to relocate the tenants that were in that building. I think there was something like 6 or 7 years ago. And so the owner of, put an enormous amount of money into that building. That was low-income housing, but it was low-income housing that you wouldn't want to put anyone in. And so I do feel that I agree with the mayor. I think this is too short a turnaround time. I would like to see the subcommittee lengthen that time so that the appropriate changes can be made for the owners of the properties.
Councilmember Coors?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just a couple things in responding. I think Chair has already said it, but I think we were fine with a longer time period. We just sort of were talking about what it should be at the meeting. And again, if there's a way we can do it to make it the most easy for the existing ones, because they were operating under the old those rules at the time. That's our goal here. So on tenants in common, which is used in San Francisco because they don't really allow condo conversions. There's like a lottery and you get a handful of them. They're usually in 2 or 3 unit buildings. But you wouldn't be able to do it under this because they're multifamily buildings, right? So we don't allow, if the ordinance is written, wouldn't allow it in multi-unit family buildings. So they wouldn't be able to do it as a tenants in common and rent the entire building.
So if it's a 3-unit building and then the owner went out and got 2 other people involved in ownership, 2 other members of the family in ownership, then why would that not be a condo and being able to rent out as a, because we're not including condos in this.
If they want to go through the condo conversion process and a CUP, everything that goes with becoming a condo, they could do that. And that's something.
So just because you don't address a co-op in here.
We don't do co-ops.
And we don't
Okay.
address condos.
But yeah, we don't address condos. But I would suggest at the next Affordable Housing Subcommittee, we talk about condo conversion, because I
Okay.
think your point is really well taken. On the duplex idea, and I'm not sure how we would do this, but I think if you have an owner-occupied unit, and the owner actually lives in it and doesn't rent it out at all, and there's and they're willing to have a vacation rental next to them, I think that would be okay. But they couldn't rent out the other unit either full or part-time, right? I don't know what you think on that. So, I mean, I think I'm open to that if there's a way we could figure out how to draft that and enforce it. But if staff sees a way to do that, I'm not, if the owner's willing to have that next to them, it's like a casita in a way.
Yeah, we currently have a hotel, an establishment that was operating as a hotel that has a main house and has 5, I think there's 4 or 5 units, but it's in a residential area. And so they were renting it out and acting as a hotel, and to my knowledge, they are still acting as a hotel.
And that shouldn't be legal
And
now.
that shouldn't be legal now.
It is.
So we have all of these little quirks in the
We do.
city, which I think we have to address and make sure they're covered in this.
Councilmember Roberts?
Yes, I'm listening, and this helps a lot. I think we needed we needed to test the waters with the full council to find out where else we should go with this and how we should adjust it. Again, one of the objectives, and I didn't bring this list of objectives, we don't need them this minute, because again, they more relate to houses, but a few of them relate overall, and one of them was that our job as council members is to help maintain a high quality of life for our residents. It's also our job to create a quality tourist experience and work with our businesses. But when it comes to our neighborhoods, in the way that Jeff and I approach this, residents, full or part-time, come first. If we're going to do short-term rentals anywhere, anyhow, they're a privilege. They're not a right. They're an accessory use, an ancillary use to somebody's home or to somebody's extra unit or whatever it is. So the goal is to really move away from turning what would be residents' homes, part-time or full-time, into businesses, just pure investment businesses for people who don't live here, or even if they do live here, just turning neighborhoods into businesses. That's what we want to move away from. That's the goal. And that's certainly the goal with apartments. So tell me if I'm hearing things correctly. What you'd like to do is send it back to the subcommittee with some of the ideas, which include perhaps working with staff to build a transition plan, a more solid, user-friendly transition plan for people to convert back to apartments and or hotels, which would include a different sunset period, as well as looking at zoning for kitchens and safety requirements.
One question on that
Please.
is the right way to do this, given we have a moratorium that's expiring?
We'd have to extend the
We either have to
moratorium.
extend it or pass this and make changes, or, I don't know, City Attorney, Mr. Holland, what do
Good
you think?
question. What would
my
you
question.
prefer?
When does it expire?
End of November.
November
I think
30th.
we would just, at the next meeting, bring back
Yeah,
an
we could
ordinance
extend it, 'cause it only takes one
extending the
ordinance.
regulations for just a little bit of time. We'll calculate the exact date that we can bring back an ordinance, for you to consider.
Not sure it would all be based on this being completed before you try to leave.
Yes.
I have another question, too. My question is, how are we addressing this in relation to Airbnb?
We have no control over Airbnb.
So, which left me with a feeling of this being very unfair for people who've come into this city and spent a lot of money when across the street they've
So what do you mean
got-
by Airbnb? People who are renting out
Yeah,
illegally?
yeah, who are
without permits?
renting out rooms in their, or casitas or rooms in their house through Airbnb. Are we addressing that now?
That will be handled in the next regulations, whatever council's going to do in the single family.
But there are some existing rules tied to renting out part of your house, only part of your house to someone, aren't there? We went through those at one of the subcommittee meetings.
That's currently, that you would have to have a vacation rental
Yeah.
certificate, but that is currently allowable to rent out all or a portion of your house at one time.
But only with a vacation rental certificate, otherwise it's illegal.
Correct.
So if there
No.
are folks doing that on Airbnb, and we do have someone who does rent places and finds them, they get sort of slapped on the wrist a little bit, which is something we are going to address, really increasing the fines for these illegal, non-permitted, whether they're Airbnb or full single-family residences, to really change the rules around that
Well, and I would add that
and pull their permits.
one of the most powerful pieces of dealing with STRs is going to be a new heightened level and very strict enforcement. And we're starting to put the pieces of that together. And as as we look at every solution and trying to deal and monitor with STRs, we realize that maybe some of the best ideas we can come up with are unenforceable. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to do a certain amount of trust. But when we have problems with an STR and we go out to enforce, if we find there's a direct violation, like they don't have a permit, they're going through Airbnb, they're not registered, they're in violation of how long, how many, that's an instant loss of their permit. So we're going to have it's really going to be about people rolling the dice, taking risks on this, where they will lose their permits altogether.
And I think that the legitimate operators of the existing properties are anxious to see that.
Right, they are.
Because they've worked real hard, too, a number of the companies, to make sure that doesn't happen at their facilities.
Well, I think objective number 3 in our list of objectives is to completely eliminate repeat offenders and eliminate them quickly.
Okay.
So it sounds to me like, I would say that we should probably give people 2 to 3 years to
I think that makes sense.
to do this. And also, should we relook at calling it 5 or more instead of 2 or more units?
Oh,
No. And I'll tell you why, because and I appreciate the point that 5 or more are commercial, but we're trying to protect places for residents.
Okay.
So 3 and 4 are residential. And actually, if you're in a 4-unit, if you're in fourplex and 2 are vacation rentals and 2 are not, you're sharing a pool, you're sharing your garage, you're sharing laundry often.
So is the subcommittee recommending we change the date and go ahead and vote on this, or are you kicking it back
We're
to?
asking our city attorney.
Well, I guess there are 3 things that you were looking at. One would be to change the date. If you end up referring this back to the committee, we could look at putting some additional language in there that could talk about amortization, or we could just leave it the way it is, or come up with your date. The other 2 issues, we could change the definition of amendment to read: amendment means 1, a residential unit in a multifamily development of 2 dwelling units where both dwelling units are rented or leased for occupancy as a residence for individual families, and 2, a residential unit in a multifamily development of 3 or more dwelling units where 1 or more units is rented or leased for occupancy as a residence for 1 or more families. I think that deals with your duplex issue, and it also would deal with 3 or more, it being the way that it's handled. Then in regard to D, which talks about the provisions of A, Section A shall not apply or be enforced, and that would have the time limit, whatever that time limit is. And then we could also add an additional sentence there, or actually a new section E after D, that would say the provisions of subsection A, which is the prohibition, shall not apply to any building in which an apartment is located, meets all requirements of an R1 occupancy under the city's building and fire code requirements. And so that would...
Already permitted.
That's right.
Right, with a permit.
Yeah.
So would that cover, Flynn and Marcus are talking, would that cover our goal here?
I think it does, yes.
Flynn?
All we would need to do is get what dates you're satisfied with in D.
I think if,
What we're doing, we are not issuing any new permits.
Correct.
This is only dealing with already permits.
But we could include that in this document now, and you could
we can do that
introduce
now.
that ordinance.
So we can. Do we want to move? Yeah, so why don't we move it, then we don't have to do the extension of the moratorium. If
And then
we can
adjust
do those
it?
fixes? Well, Doug, can we do those now?
Yes.
So why don't we do those now? Are you good with 3 years?
Um,
Let's talk about the
yeah,
length of
let's
time.
let's come to an agreement
It's 3
on
years.
the sunset period.
Okay.
Mayor suggesting 3
I'm good
years.
with that.
I'm good with that.
Marcus, what do you think? Because, this is going to be sort of labyrinthine process for people. There's not that many of them right now, 54 or something. So what do you think would be a fair time?
And we're, just to be clear, we're not requiring them to change to a hotel. We're just requiring, per the language, the health and safety requirements be the same. So I just want to be clear, they don't have to go through the CUP process, they don't have to change their title, nothing like that. The existing ones, yeah.
Does 3 years seem fair?
It's
Many of them.
It's-
it-
54.
It's an
no,
odd
but
arbitrary
some of them
number.
are, like,
Yeah,
there's
just picking a
17
number.
a twist.
We're picking a
You know,
number out of
so-
the air that we think is a fair amount of time for people to go to the many options that are available to
Right.
them.
Right.
Back to long-term rentals, hotel conversion,
For compliance.
or
with the rules.
compliance, yeah.
Seems like 3 years, I think would be adequate.
So, we had picked January 18th. Do we want to just extend that January
Another
1
2 years.
date for 3 more years?
Two past 18,
What
so it'd
were
be
you- what
January
was it-
1st, 20.
What was it in here now?
We were giving them a year. We
months.
made them all expire on the same day, which I think was January 1, 2018.
For the
So we
same
were giving them
January.
whatever they had left in this year, plus.
So to make it 2 more years, make it 3 years, be 2020.
2
2020.
years, that's a
2
long
years.
time, 3 years.
2 years. So it's 2 years and 3 months, 19.
2 years rather than 3 years?
I think it's a long.
And if we ran,
It's an arbitrary number.
Yes.
I mean, Jeff and I have headaches
Yes.
trying to think that out, and this is just something we're guessing.
and given their health and safety requirements, the sooner the better. So,
Okay, I'm fine with that.
So
But I
what,
think we should make a decision. I mean,
Two
to
years.
you
to
want
not
to
make a decision.
I mean, I have no issue, frankly, extending the moratorium as long as we're not issuing new permits. If you want to get it more worked out with staff, we can have stakeholders potentially work with staff on this. But if you like the basic
yeah,
structure of what we have, I guess we can just try to do the fixes.
Right.
In the meantime, it's just the meters
Okay.
running. So if
Yeah.
we say we're going to give them a 3-year period and say they rush to the window now and say, okay, I want to convert or I want to, we can't even really start that process immediately because we're not ready.
Right.
That's my concern unless staff feels like they can quickly alter or create again a transition plan, a friendlier transition plan from apartments to hotels if that's where they're going to go.
and I think
We have those processes set up already.
But are we going to alter them at all for these? Are we going to make them less onerous for, that's the question.
that's sort of what Doug wrote
Okay.
already, right?
Yeah, he already wrote that.
Doug wrote the provision where they don't have to convert. They just need to come into compliance with the rules.
Okay.
So I think 2 years is plenty to come in compliance with the rules.
I can go with 2 or 3 years. Again, to me, it's an
Me too.
arbitrary
2
number.
years is fine.
2 years.
2 years, is that
Okay,
the,
I'll make
Well, it's
that,
actually 2 years and 3 months. So.
Yes.
so I'm
Wanna
making
make
that
the
the motion with the changes Doug read and the increase of an extra year.
So to 2019.
Correct.
you know, again, at the end of the day, this is a very difficult process. We don't take anything for granted, and we're taking this very seriously. But there is no way for us to come out on the other side of something like this, keeping anyone or everybody happy. It's going to be a difficult process, but we do feel confident it's for the long-term good of our city. If our job is to think out in the future about the impacts of our decisions today, we feel good about this.
And remember, our biggest responsibilities, I think, is public safety and our residents, and this covers both of them.
Absolutely.
And I just want to add, I think we've had 5 vacation rental subcommittees in the last 5 weeks, roughly. We had 2 just on apartments. We have another one on Monday. So we really are doing a lot. And we have 3 hours scheduled for the next meeting. So we really are trying to get a lot and a lot of options. So when we meet with council, we really have done the work, research, have some recommendations, but present a lot of different options for discussion.
We're also getting a tremendous amount of help from the community.
I want to compliment you on this because it is a difficult issue. We've got, people who live in the city who are, concerned about neighborhoods, and we have people who have chosen to invest a great deal of money in our city. And, and many of whom live in our city also. And so, and plus employ a lot of people in our city. So it's, it's a very difficult issue for us.
However, people do deserve an answer from us one way or the other.
Absolutely. and we will continue on. We're about to wrestle the biggest bear of all, which will be single-family residences.
Yeah.
And again, people are so passionate about this and angry and on all sides of this, where Jeff and I are getting bombarded. And again, we asked for this. We asked to be on this subcommittee. We wanted to take this on, but I'm telling you, it's taken everything within us to
But people have to
deal with it.
understand that it's a compromise, because there is compromises to be made. And I think that anyone who vilifies the two of you in whatever decisions you bring here are really do so at their own peril, because this is a difficult thing, and we need to come to some conclusions, but it doesn't mean one side wins and the other side loses. And so there has to be a willingness to compromise.
I've often thought that the cities that did the outright ban, it wasn't because there were no other choices. It was because it's so difficult to try to come up with what you feel is a fair compromise and preserve your small town character, your quality of neighborhoods, and at the same time offer this as an alternative form of lodging. And Palm Springs has been about lodging as much as it's been about, full-time residents for as long as anyone can remember.
It is our industry. We don't make widgets here. We have no widget factories.
That's what I always say. We don't make
know?
cars or grow corn.
I know we need widgets, but our industry is tourism. And so there has to be a balance between our residents and our major industry that supports our way of life, that supports our police department, our fire department, and all the things that we've taken for granted.
That's where the rubber meets the road.
But we also, as I said a while ago, we also do have a really good inventory of small hotels that are licensed and operate as a true small hotel.
Right.
And they're actually asking us to help them out because they're hurting.
Indeed.
Need a second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Coors, seconded by Councilmember Roberts to approve with the amendments. Motion's on the floor.
It's a motion to waive reading the ordinance text and introduce on first reading ordinance 1902, an ordinance of the City of Palm Springs, California, prohibiting the rental of apartments as vacation rentals, amending that ordinance regarding 4 different areas, amending it for housing that is affordable, amending the definition of apartment to provide for duplex, as Mr. Holland read, and adding a new section to the ordinance regarding life safety requirements for existing properties, as the city attorney had read, and amending the sunset date to January 1st, 2019.
We're going to miss you, Jay.
And that ordinance, introduction of that ordinance carried 4-0.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next. Shall we continue on? We're almost finished, I think. Yeah, okay. All right. I know I just didn't, it was 10 o'clock, so. Yes, okay. Next speaker is Frank Tyson, followed by Marla Malaspina.
I would like to talk about vacation rentals. The last decade or so, this town has become a great place for developers and for speculators. Developers, every time there are 90 PDDs, and all of them have increased the density, which has not helped the town. I go to cocktail parties in Los Angeles, and they say, go to Palm Springs, buy a vacation home, make a lot of money. This council was elected to reverse that trend. People are tired of the culture of commercialism that this town has been besieged with. If not, this town will be ruined, because as people continue to sell their homes because they're so tired of living next to these vacation rentals, it ultimately will become a city of vacation rentals. And also, there go the small hotels. As we all know, the small hotels had a lot to do with the revitalization of this town in the 80s and 90s. I was here in the 80s and 90s, and I tell you, it was a dead town. But they do determine the character of this town. At the same time, they're a labor of love. I mean, if you want to make money, you buy a place like Lulu's. You don't buy a small hotel. Most of them are small mom and pop places. The profit margin is small. And in the last couple of years, I've seen many of them go down as much as 10% in their revenues. And there goes the neighborhood, there go those small hotels. And all the concern about the investors, they still have a product. They bought a house, they fixed it up, they spent some money, they'll sell it. But the neighbors and the residents and the small hotels are the ones who are going to suffer. You've got to stand up and be counted. No more dancing around on this. If Anaheim and Santa Barbara can do it, Anaheim is not exactly a village, and they can say, okay, you have a year and a half, let's listen to them.
Thank you, Mr. Tyson. Next is Marla Malaspina, followed by Mike Ziskind. Then Steve Rose will be our last speaker, unless someone else puts a card in. Good evening.
Thank you. So I thought there was going to be pizza here tonight, so I'm actually a little too hungry to talk. But I do want to just apologize for. I want.
At least, you know,
McLean. It's practice for Monday.
I'm going to start your time. I'm going to start her time over. Okay.
I just want to apologize for speaking out of turn. It was not my intent earlier today. So I'm going to save my comments for Monday. You have the written version of them for tonight. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Malaspina. Next is Mike Ziskind, followed by Steve Rose.
Good evening again. I apologize. I don't know about the rules, but I am slowly learning, so forgive me. It was never my intention to speak on the wrong issue. So I will speak now. I congratulate you on passing the moratorium, and I urge the council this evening to expand it to include conversion of single-family residences. We don't see the difference between 2 or more, 3 or more, 4 or more, and 1 or more. The city never explained why its stated purpose of banning apartment conversions, protecting affordable housing, would not be better served by extending the ban to single-family residences. There's no substantial evidence or adequate explanation supporting the conclusion that conversion of single-family units to vacation rentals would not have similar adverse impacts as conversion of apartments. As explained to detail in a letter from Pond's attorney sent to the council today, and you probably haven't had time to read it because it got here very, very late, allowing vacation rentals in residential neighborhoods violates the zoning ordinance. The code requires individual analysis of each application to make sure that the use will be compatible with the neighborhood. And our practice merely allows people to fill out a form and they get a permit without any regard at all to whether or not those uses detract and change the character of our neighborhood. So again, I apologize for before, and thank you for letting me come back and speak.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ziskind. Next will be Steve Rose, and Mr. Rose is our last speaker.
Oh, boy. I disagree that with the reasons that you've separated apartment buildings from single-family dwellings. Because if you say that apartment buildings share a common wall, and for that reason they're not suitable for short-term rentals, then you must extend that logic to include single-family homes. Renters of a single-family home spend most of their time in a backyard, and the only thing that separates them from their 3 neighbors is a 6-foot fence. Noises, odors, and an occasional flying beer can easily traverse a 6-foot fence. We wish we had a wall, a soundproof wall. You say that because apartment buildings have a communal shared amenity, such as a pool, that they are not suitable for short-term rentals. Then you must extend that logic and include single-family homes. People moderate their behavior when they're in a communal setting. Because renters of a single-family home perceive they are in a private space, they behave in ways that they would never do in public. And our neighborhoods are communal as well. So bad behavior in one backyard affects a whole neighborhood. You say that because apartment buildings provide affordable housing, they are not suitable for short-term rentals. Then you must extend that logic to include single-family homes. We're used to having a robust single-family home rental market that is now all but gone. You used to be able to rent a nice house with a backyard and a pool for $1,600. For two people, that's $800 a piece. That's affordable. Short-term vacation rentals have decimated this entire class of affordable housing. The visitor renting a short-term rental in an apartment is not likely to spend that much time in the apartment. They are far more likely to go to the Ace, Saguaro, or Rive. Yet the visitor renting a single-family house is going to use that house as their personal resort, and they will not leave for the entire weekend, creating a much more intense use.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rose. Seeing no further speakers, we will